Okay, hello friends, and welcome in today's session on retrospective anti-patterns. So friends, my name is Sunil Sharma. I'm an agile consultant based in Den Haag, Netherlands, and I'm the moderator of this webinar. So before I introduce today's guest, few do's and don'ts. So please turn on your webcam because it's going to be a fun session. So it has to be face to face, and please be on mute. And if you have any questions, please put it in a chat. We will pick your queries, question at the end of the session. So you can clear all your doubts, anything with respect to retrospective or anything else as well. So friends, let me introduce today's guest. We have Aino Corry with us, joining us all the way from Denmark. She is the author of the book Retrospective Antipatterns. She's an agile coach at Lago Group, and she's serving as an executive director at Skills Matter as well. So welcome, Corry, and thanks for accepting our invite and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today, Corry.
Thank you, Sunand, and thank you for inviting me. I'll just share my slides because I prepared some slides for you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just, right before we started, I took away a lot of the slides because I thought that it would actually be more fun to go through less slides and then have some time for questions. So I hope that there'll be some questions. I've opened the chat and I can see the chat while I'm speaking. So if there are any questions while I'm talking, you can just write it there. I've a warning, I tend to be pretty focused on my talk while I'm talking, so maybe I don't look at it, but then I'll look at it at the end, definitely. Right, so without further ado, let's start. So first I want to say who I am. So as you can see, I have a PhD in computer science. So I did that in the development of programming languages 20 years ago. And since then I've been working more and more towards team building and how to optimize processes for building software. And I started being interested in retrospectives 15 years ago when I was at a talk with Linda Rising, and she gave me this book about project retrospectives by Norm Kurth. And if you don't know this book, you should know it because it's one of the first books written about retrospectives, and it's really, really helpful. It's from back in the days when retrospectives took 2 to 3 days. So when people are asking me, how can we make a faster retrospective? I say, well, look at this book. And then 2 hours of retrospectives is actually pretty fast. And then because of Agile, as you know, Esther Derby and Dana Larsen made this book about Agile retrospective, which of course I've also worked with. And I've worked with Dana Larsen for courses in retrospectives. And then as Sunand mentioned, I've written my own book about all the mistakes that I've done in the 15 years I've been facilitating retrospectives. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I looked through the other careers talks about retrospectives, and I can see that some of the things that has been covered there are different ways of doing retrospectives, different activities in retrospectives. So what I'm going to talk about is more like what can go wrong in retrospectives and how can you remedy that? How can you get out of that situation? How can you avoid these things? So I'm going to talk about 4 of the anti-patterns from my book, but I've got 24 anti-patterns in the book. So perhaps if you have some more questions, we can talk about more of these. But without further ado, I'd like to start. And I already gave a talk for Agile India today. So I've been in India and now apparently I'm in The Hague. So that's interesting. It's an interesting remote world. So what I want with this is that I want you to think that whenever there's retrospective time, it'll be a lot of fun and you'll like it and you'll be interested in it. Sometimes I come out to companies where people have experienced really bad retrospectives that were a waste of time. And then when I came as the facilitator, they already felt they didn't want the retrospective. And if they had to, they wanted to get it over with pretty quickly. So they want like 20 minutes or half an hour of a retrospective where they're just sitting in a circle saying, so what worked, what didn't work, what should we do differently? And that's not the most efficient way of having retrospectives. So when I think about retrospectives, I think about them as team meetings, recurring team meetings where you can share things and where you can appreciate things, not just the things that went well, but also the things that didn't go so well, but also appreciating each other and giving compliments and saying, thank you for this, or I really appreciate that you always help with this code reviews or things like that. And then, of course, you want to learn, because that is what you want with the retrospective, is that you want it to be a learning experience. So I think that these things are very important, but also to understand everything is to forgive everything. And that goes together with the Prime Directive by Norm Kurth. So Norm Kurth is the one that wrote the first book about retrospectives, and his Prime Directive is like this. I'll just let you read it on your own. So what Norm is saying with this is that when we enter a retrospective, we should try to get into the mindset that everybody did the best they could, given what they knew at the time and the skills they had and the energy level they had that day. And I think it's extremely important that we try to enter retrospectives thinking like this, thinking that we don't want to find a scapegoat, we don't want to blame and name people, we don't want to point fingers. We want to learn, we want to appreciate, we want to understand how this system, which consists of people in the team, how this system can be improved. That's what we want to do. And if we actually implement this mindset, if we really think about it like that, it will also prevent people from being too worried about going to retrospectives and sharing the things that didn't go as planned, or maybe even failures. But sometimes people tend to ignore this Prime Directive because they think it's a bit silly and they can't really genuinely believe that everybody did the best they could. But you should try to strive to do it anyway. Perhaps just write it in your own words in an email before the retrospective, just to remind people again and again that we're trying to improve the system and not finding faults in singular people. So I hope that you know about this Prime Directive, and otherwise I hope that you'll remember it in the future. So I want to talk about the first anti-pattern that I see. I call it the Wheel of Fortune. The reason why I call it the Wheel of Fortune is because, like a Wheel of Fortune, when you turn it, sometimes you're lucky and you get a prize, but other times you're unlucky and you lose all your money. And one of the ways that you sometimes gather data in a retrospective is by having these three posters: let's start doing this, let's stop doing this, let's continue doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with collecting data like this. So imagine that we did that, and perhaps we want more pair programming, we want less meetings, and we want to stop ignoring the pull requests, right? That could be something that comes up when you have a retrospective gathering data. That's something that I've seen numerous times, especially these three. These are sort of role models for different things that come up. The trouble comes if you go directly to solving these issues, if you don't spend time talking about it and figuring out what they are. Because what if the things that you see are just symptoms and not the actual cause? What if the symptom that you see, that there are not a lot of pair programming, is caused by people not trusting each other, or not having psychological safety, not knowing how to do it technologically on a remote way? And if you didn't just solve it quickly by saying, well, we'll just plan how much pair programming we'll have, then it won't solve the problem, and we'll still have problems with pair programming. It could be the same with less meetings. I see a lot of people in retrospective saying, we want less meetings, we don't want all these meetings. And if you jump to conclusions, you just say, well, let's take away some of the stand-up meetings. Let's take away every other planning meeting. Let's take away these retrospectives. But the trouble is that if you're only removing the symptoms, then you're not removing the cause. And if the cause is that you have really bad meetings, really bad meeting culture, then that will prevail. That will still be there. Even if you have less meetings, it'll just be less useless meetings. So stop ignoring the pull requests is also the same thing. I mean, you could set up a bot that says, don't ignore this when people have sent this in, but maybe that's not the problem. Maybe it's because they don't know how to do it. So I think instead of rushing through a retrospective like this, going directly from gathering data and deciding what to do, you should respect the 5 phases of a retrospective. One of them is setting the stage, where you're getting ready. Here's where you look back at the action points from the last retrospective. You're following up on them, and you're saying, well, what did we do? Did we do it? Did we not do it? If we didn't do it, why didn't we? If we did do it, did we gain the things that we wanted to gain? Because there was a reason why you choose these action points or experiments last time. And then this is also the time where you say, well, there's a theme for this retrospective. It could be that we're focusing on the testing strategy, or we're focusing on the communication, we're focusing on how we learn as a team. There could be many ways to do this, but also this is a time where you ask everybody to say something. Because if you allow everybody to say something, it'll be easier for them to continue to say something in the retrospective, especially if it's online, when you have been unmuted and you've said something. And you can ask things that has to do with the sprint. You can ask serious adult things like, what was the success that you had in the last sprint? What did you learn in the last sprint? But you can also say, what was the last thing you had for dinner? Or what are you looking forward to? Or what's the next thing you'll see in the cinema? Or what series are you following right now on Netflix or other offerings? But just having that takes away the brain residue from the last meeting and gets people focused. You can also call it an icebreaker. Then you have the gathering data, which you can do in various ways. And that's normally the easiest thing to do at a retrospective. You can gather data with post-it notes. You can gather data by looking at burn down charts. You can gather data by looking at feedback from customers or anything really. Data can be anything and can be gathered either at the retrospective or before the retrospective, asynchronously in between the retrospectives. The point about this is to have something to talk about, to have something to learn from, to have some evidence, and then you generate the insights. And when you generate the insights, what you do is that you either have a conversation about these post-it notes, about the data, or you have these 5 whys or 5 hows where you interview each other about the cause behind these things. Or if it's something that's really complex, then you can make something called a fishbone diagram or an Ishikawa diagram, where you sort of try to brainstorm about all the different things that could have caused these problems. So for instance, if you have a missed deadline, and that's something that you see over and over again, and you say, well, let's actually have a cause analysis on this. And then you ask people to brainstorm for different types of causes. It could be that they say, well, we don't really have a good prioritization about things, and that's why we missed the deadline. So we made things in the wrong order. Or it could be that maybe we have too much tech debt, so it's impossible to work with the system. Or it could be like the requirements are set too early and we didn't have the agility, the flexibility to get there. Or it could be that people had no motivation, there's no celebrations of small wins. And the last thing is, if you ask people to brainstorm, then you get everything that's in their brain and everything is okay. So maybe some people will say, well, we didn't meet the deadline because the desks are too small. And then you can say, well, maybe desks being too small is not really the problem, but it's okay for people to let some air out. That's also part of the retrospective, that they can say, well, this is irritating to me. I want to complain about this. And then when you've generated the insights, you can go to deciding what to do. But it's important that you generate insights before you decide what to do, so that you try to find the causes and solve the real problems instead of just solving the symptoms of the problems. And then you close the retrospective. And this is also a very important part of the retrospective, where you say, well, this is where we came from, this is what we talked about, this is what we want to do. And then these are the action points or the experiments that you made. And then who is going to be responsible for these? Because sometimes people say, well, it's a team responsibility, everybody should think about that. But that doesn't really work in the real world. You need somebody to be responsible for perhaps reminding the team members about doing these things, or initiating it with an email or a meeting invitation or something like that. And this is also the time where you sometimes have a retrospective over the retrospective, where you ask, did this work for you? Or should we do it differently, another way? And then you also can see that it fits with the life cycle of any meeting. So any meeting has this life cycle that you start with a topic, and then you are diverging out and opening the conversation with more data and more experiences. And then you have this growth zone where you're not competing, but discussing and sharing more information and saying, oh, this is probably the right way. Let's go here. Let's talk about this. And then you go into convergence, where you cut off the branches of the communication and you reach a decision. And it's the same for a retrospective. And the point about this is that the growth zone is where you're generating insights. And the growth zone can be difficult, especially if you're working with developers, because they really want to solve things. So even when they put up a problem, they sometimes come up with the solution as well. And as a facilitator, you have to sort of almost physically keep this growth zone open, so that people can still communicate about it before they say, oh, we're going to solve it like this, or we're going to solve it by that. And sometimes it's really difficult for people. And then you have to be really firm as a facilitator and say, well, if you can't stop talking about proposals, then maybe you should put it on a post-it note and put it somewhere else. So that's the Wheel of Fortune. And I'm wondering if any of you have ever found yourself in a Wheel of Fortune. Is that something that you're struggling with? That you see this, that you are rushing through the retrospective, forgetting to talk about it, and just coming up with action points that it doesn't really work. Have any of you seen anything like that?
I would say, Corey, that In fact, in the beginning, even I am not aware about these 5 stages, honestly. So for us, because we learn from our peers, right? Whatever we see from our seniors, from our,
Mhm.
around us, right? We thought that that's the right way.
Yeah,
Or we are not spending much time on reading some good books, as you mentioned, right? And that's the one thing which I still feel is very important and which is missed still. There are a lot of people who are now becoming a Scrum Master, and they don't have that much time and patience to go back and read some good books. But this is what I'm telling. Like, if you don't know the proper structure, like how to approach retrospective, how to approach sprint planning, what is the outcome, what is your role in that whole event, right? That's more
yeah.
important. And that's
It's yeah.
somehow, yeah, people are still missing. So yeah, it's very important. And you just refresh at least my thought points, important points. Like, these are the 5 stages. The one diagram which you have shown regarding root cause analysis is still valid. We have seen that diagram, I think 10-15 years back, that fishbone thing, and that is still
Mhm.
pretty valid. This one, and I still remember that 5 Ys and 1H thing.
Mhm.
This is pretty much similar to this root cause analysis, right? So whether you
Yeah,
are doing agile, whether you are doing traditional waterfall model thing and all these things will still valid. So that's
yeah.
the point.
And I
So
think
yeah,
I think it's important, yeah, what you say there, that reading books about it, because if you only see other people do it, that's great, because you understand perhaps that you have to do this, but you don't understand why you have to do this. And I think reading books about it and communicating about it is so important, because if you just saw somebody saying, oh, we have to go through these 5 stages in the retrospective, I think it's important to know why it is. Why is it important to set the stage? Why is it important to gather data? Why is it important to generate insights? Because one of the things that I see with retrospectives often is that they say, well, it's a waste of time. We don't change anything with the retrospective. And there's so many reasons for not changing things with retrospectives and for them being a waste of time. And one of them is this wheel of fortune, because you're solving the symptoms and not the actual problem. So the problems are still there and they will cause more symptoms later on. Another reason for having useless or time wasting retrospectives is this anti-pattern that I see that's called in the soup. And that means that you as a team are spending a lot of time discussing things that you can't really change. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. But sometimes I see teams where they're just complaining. And as I said, it's nice to let out some air at a retrospective and to complain a bit, but it should be constructive in a retrospective. It should be something that you actually get something out of, that you learn something from, and so that you can change the way that you work together. That's a point of the retrospective. That's the core of Agile, right? That you inspect and you adapt. But sometimes I see a team where they don't really want to take responsibility for the things. They're just complaining. And in those cases, I use this diagram on them. I say, let's try this circles of influence, or the soup diagram. It's got many names and it's not native to retrospectives. It's been used in many ways. And the point of it is to say, well, look at all the things that we're talking about. How many of these things can we actually do something about? How many of these things can we influence? And how many of these things are in the soup where we can't do anything about it? So in Denmark, we said, please give me coffee so that I can be awake and solve the problems that I can solve. And please give me red wine so that I can forget the things that I can't change anyway. And please give me the wisdom to know the difference. So I think that this way of thinking about your problems is extremely important, not just in retrospectives, but in your whole life, so that you don't just complain about things that you can't change anyway, because then you're just a nuisance to people around you. You want to figure out, what can I change, and then change that. Well, it sounds easier than it is, right? It's simple, but it's not easy. But imagine that I'm using this activity. I sometimes do it after, when we've gathered data and we're looking at all the problems that people have. And then I say, well, let me introduce this soup diagram. And then they say, well, all these things are problems. And I say, let's take the post-it notes and move them over to the soup diagram. Like, we have too much tech debt, right? That's something we can do something about. The communications with the testers is bad. That's not something we can do something about, but we can definitely influence it. And then we have COVID makes it hard to socialize. Well, that's in the soup. We can't really change COVID. But the interesting thing is that once you start generating insights, once you start talking about it, maybe you can come up with things that means that you can actually influence it. So for instance, it could be that you can't change the communication with the testers, but you can move closer to the testers, and that might improve the communication. That's something you can do as a team. It could also be that you can't change COVID, but maybe you can make social time every day and people can come to it if they want or not. And that's something you can do. So instead of just saying, this is irritating, try to look at all the problems, identify which ones you can change. And the ones you can't change in the soup, you just need to find a way to adapt to that, to live around it, to accept these things. So I do this after gather data, but I also sometimes do it after deciding what to do. Because if I do it after gathering data, then I try to remove the things that would be a waste of time to talk about, right? I say, let's not discuss this anymore because we can't change it. So let's focus the rest of the retrospective on things that we actually can change. But it's equally interesting once they've brainstormed about what to do, because sometimes, you know, when you brainstorm about proposals for action points or experiments, sometimes people come up with things that the manager should do, or the testers should do, or somebody else should do. So a picture could look like this, that all these things that we should do, we want to change the location of the company, we want to code review all major changes, and we want to create some meetings that are not useless, right? But not all these things are something that we can do. And you can see that if you decide that what you want to do is change the location of the company, you'll just get irritated. So I'm just going to show this slide, and then I'm going to ask you, Sanand, I can see your hand is raised. So what you can do is, again, try to figure out when you discuss it, how can we get these things closer to the middle? So Sanand, did you have a question?
Yeah, Corey, actually, you have touched very important point, and I'm glad like you have come up with this point in this presentation, because I also often get this question a lot of time. And sometimes in the beginning also, like I will struggle a lot with this thing, because what happened that some of the action items, so let's say now team is there and they started jotting down the points and this and that. And now few of the action items are beyond the scope of team, something which is I cannot take the decision, something which my team cannot take the decision, something which is depend on my management or on my client directly. So for example, let's say my team want to go out for a, let's say one gathering or something like that, right? And then it's required a budget. And then when we reach out to our management that, okay, we require, let's say 1,000 euro or something like that. And they say, no, we don't have budget. Okay. So now what we can do about it? Now my team is totally demotivated and they are like, what we can do. So that is something which we can look out. Then what I have done, like, okay, I will go back and then think about the possibilities. Okay, let's not get into that lavish hotel. Maybe we can go to some other small pub. It's always about how we can change our priorities, or we can come up with some alternative. Okay, let's put our own money. If people are not management, let's why we are depending on management for all these small things, right? Let's create our own pool of money. By that we can move out for monthly basis, or we can use it for our birthday parties or any celebrations, things like that, right? So that is whoever is watching this video, right? They have to understand that there are few things which sometimes we feel helpless, like, okay, I don't have that authority to approve this or do that, right? But then in that case, this complete picture came into picture. This whatever we are seeing on the screen, right? That which we can influence, what we can do about it, and something which is beyond our scope, right? So I think it's an important point, and I just want to share that thing, Corey.
Thank you, and I think that your anecdote is very helpful here, because it's about saying, okay, these are the circumstances we're in. How can we make the most of what we have right now? And I sometimes do that with my own problems as well, personally, where I have all these things that are bothering me, and I say, well, let's try to figure out what can I do something about? What do I just have to accept? So that I call this in the soup, and you can see that the octopus here is trying to lift a weight that it can't lift. And I'm here, the octopus is the team, and the team can't lift it. So it's just going to be more and more frustrated if it continues to do that. So that's what I call it in the soup. And another anti-pattern that I see often is that, especially when people are using Scrum and has Scrum masters, it's normally so that it's always the Scrum master who facilitates the retrospectives. And that can be problematic for various reasons. One is that it's actually pretty hard to facilitate a retrospective. So you have to be really aware. You have to have your eyes on the time. You have to look at people's body language, especially when it's online. It's more difficult because you can't see whether people are angry, whether they want to ask something, or whether you've completely lost them and they're not part of the retrospective anymore. So it's really hard to be a facilitator if you have to do it well. And sometimes you also have to change the agenda. Like if you notice that they're not taking responsibility on the things that they are complaining about or the things that they want to do, then you add this little circles and soup activity in there, and you have to be aware that you have to do that. Or if people are talking about things that they always talk about, maybe you have to shut down the conversation. Or if you have somebody who's a loudmouth, you have to split people up in smaller groups so that they can actually communicate without one person taking control of the conversation. So it's really hard to be a facilitator. So if you play the role of the facilitator, then you can't also be part of the team that gets a retrospective. And then as a team member, as a Scrum Master, you don't get a retrospective. On the other hand, if you decide to be a team member in the retrospective and be part of the discussions in the retrospective, then you can't also be a facilitator. You will forget about the time. You will not notice everybody in the meeting. So you sort of have to choose between being a team member and being a retrospective facilitator. So what I'm suggesting sometimes is don't do it yourself all the time. Perhaps other people in the team can facilitate a retrospective as well. Or perhaps even as I've done in some organizations, I've said, well, we have all these teams that wants to have facilitated retrospectives. And then we have some facilitators who want to facilitate. And then you can take turns in facilitating each other team's retrospectives in that way. And that means that teams can get new facilitators, they can get new inspiration, new activities, but you as a Scrum Master or team member can actually get a retrospective as well. And then some people will say, well, but it's difficult to facilitate retrospectives and you need to have a good facilitator. And of course, that's true. I would be stupid to say that it wasn't true. But there are a lot of online tools out there that you can use, like Retrium and NeatRO and other tools where it takes you through the retrospective. As a facilitator, you're always getting told, this is what you should do, this is the next step. And if you have on-site retrospectives, there are some dialogue sheets by Alan Kelly that you can download, and then you can do the retrospective almost like a board game, where the facilitator don't have to think about these 5 stages because the technique does it for you. So that's what I call the do-it-yourself. And then the last one I want to talk about here in the introduction before we discuss and have questions is disregard for preparation. And that's focused on the online retrospectives I see out there, because you only have maybe 60, 90 minutes for an online retrospective. And it's not a lot of time if you want to go through all 5 phases and really get a deep discussion and also have some team building and also have some fun with the team. So one thing that I say is send an email the day before with the link to the document that you want to use, because then sometimes you avoid that people will say, where's the link? You know, when you start some meeting, can you chat the link? Was it in the email? Was it in the calendar invitation? Then they search for it. And then when they found it, they need to figure out, do I need a password and blah, blah, blah. So send a link the day before and say, please go online and see if you can have, like, so that you have the access when we start the retrospective. And then also in the same line, send an email 15 minutes before, say, now we have a retrospective. We would like you to be really focused on this retrospective. So please get some coffee, go to the toilet before so that we can all start on time. Because you know sometimes how it is, if you come to an online meeting and somebody's not there and it says in the chat, I just went to get a cup of coffee, then you're saying, oh, I can get a cup of coffee too when she went to get a cup of coffee, right? And then while you're getting a cup of coffee, somebody else will enter the meeting and think, if they too are out getting coffees, I can get a coffee as well. And then you lose perhaps the first 7 to 10 minutes of the retrospective or on the online meeting. And that's a lot, that's a big percentage. The next one is insist on video for all. And I know that some people, because of bandwidth or technical issues, for them, it's not possible to be on video. But I think you should try to at least ask people why they're not on video. It's the same as that discussion between the symptoms and the causes, right? So don't single people out and say, put on your video, you idiot. Talk to them afterwards and say to them, well, me as a facilitator, it's a very important tool for me to be able to evaluate your body language, to see whether you are with us or whether you're going away, whether you want it to go faster or slower. And it's such an important tool that it's valuable for me to see you on video. And if you don't want to watch yourself on video, you can just hide your self view, as I normally do on calls. And then if you ask them why they're not on video, then of course sometimes it is the problem that they can't go on video for the reasons I said before. But sometimes you see that it's a symptom of something that's a rubbish reason. And maybe they say, I can't go on video because I'm taking this retrospective from a car. Well, if you're taking it from a car, you're not respecting the retrospective. You can't write in the document, you can't read things in the document, you're not respecting this team building exercise, this exercise of learning and improving. And if you say, I can't put on my video because I'm not dressed today, it's like also, well, you're at work, dude, get dressed. So sometimes it's a symptom and sometimes it's a problem, but talk to people about it and try to say and explain to them why it's so important. And also make sure everybody's equal, especially now when things are going back to hybrid. I sometimes have teams where they say, well, 5 of the people are back in the office and they'd like to stay in a room and the other 3 are still remote. So can we just make a hybrid where somebody's there and somebody's remote? And I say, no, that's not a good idea. And then they say, that's stupid, I know, because these 5 people can get a much better retrospective because they're together. And I say, yes, exactly. That's why you shouldn't do it. Because you want people to be equal. This is not a meeting where somebody's giving a talk and other people are listening, in which case hybrid can be fine. But this is a meeting where everybody should be equal. Everybody should be able to say something in the same way. And if you're just a little face on the wall in the room and you're trying to get the attention of people, it's really, really difficult. Of course, if it's only one person who is remote, you can put up an avatar. So you can say that one of the people who are actually physically in the room can play the avatar for that person who's remote and write the post-it notes and show with the camera where on the board we're looking. That can work, but only if it's one person. Prepare a strict agenda and also an alternative. As I said before, sometimes you notice there's a loudmouth. We need to stop talking in plenum. We need to be in smaller groups, or we need to write more instead of talk more. It could be that you have somebody who's very quiet and who needs time to reflect before they talk. Then you have to perhaps change it so that when you ask a question or when you're discussing something, people have 30 seconds to think about it before they start doing something. Or it could be that you want to enter that circles and soup and you have to have that prepared. So there's a lot more preparation in an online retrospective, unless you're using one of the tools that I talked about before. And then don't record it, because what you want in a retrospective is you want the trust. You want people to think that what happens in the retrospective stays in the retrospective. So you don't want it to be recorded and go out there and people can look at things taken out of context and, oh, he said that and that was very stupid. You don't want that with the retrospective. So that's called the disregard for preparation. And as I said, what I really want to do with this is I want you to make retrospectives or attend retrospectives that maybe not makes people dance and sing and laugh, but at least they don't think it's a waste of time. So here's also like a 35% discount on my book. But this is actually the point of what I wanted to talk about, is how do we make great, useful retrospectives? So does anybody want to share an anecdote, or does anybody have any questions? For instance, should we bring managers to retrospectives, or how do we make people talk, or anything like that?
Yeah, of course, I have many questions, but I want other people to clear their doubt.
Yeah.
Because I can always be in touch with you, but yeah.
So guys, I guess they can both write it in the chat or say it.
Scrum Masters. I mean, I was just asking these people are the Scrum Masters. Guys, you are leading your own teams, huh? Corey, you can unshare your this presentation if it's required.
And then I can see everybody. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you.
Okay, so we have Makesh, we have Sahi, we have Dilip, we have Deepika, we have Amir, we have Avantika, Satish, Vidya, Gauri. Okay, guys. So yeah, come up with your queries. I am sure you might have a lot of issues with when you are doing your retrospective. So yeah, let's discuss over here. Maybe we're not able to find exact solution, but maybe you never know, maybe something.
A query for the Corry.
Yeah. I have a question. So initially, when I began with this team, this is a new organization which I joined recently in the month of August. So these are new teams for me. So I started doing retrospective for almost close to 2 hours initially. But then later on, I combined sprint review and retrospective together and trying to reduce the meeting time so that they can have more of a productive hours for the engineers or the developers, right? So do you think that that's a good approach? Because I'm trying to cover all the aspects that which you are mentioning, right? Like in order to celebrate and also to find out what are the challenges and why there were spillovers. Mainly focusing on the improvement areas and what they can learn, what are the challenges. So I'm trying to cover all of these, and also towards the end, we are trying to vote on the stickies where we can get out the action items that we really need to work on. And I'm trying to do all this. So yeah, so do you think the time is really essential or the topics that we cover are really essential?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Shashank. This is something that I hear often. And that's also why I have, for instance, the Wheel of Fortune, where people are rushing through the retrospective. I think it's really important to respect those 5 phases. And I think it's important to respect those 5 phases, because if you take one phase out, then it won't be as constructive. And if you have a retrospective, which is perhaps half an hour and unconstructive, that is definitely a waste of time. But if you have one that's 1.5 hours, where you really get to talk about things that can change things, then it's definitely not a waste of time. I struggle with what I hear often people say, that we are spending time on retrospectives instead of real work. I get sometimes even a bit aggressive about that, because I'm saying, okay, so real work is not just putting your hands on the keyboard and making code, but real work is also about optimizing. It's about taking time to reflect about what we're doing right now. It's like the picture of the man who's trying to saw down a tree with a saw, and then people asking, why don't you get a motor saw? And he says, I don't have time to get a motor saw. To me, it's like the same, that you don't have time to reflect and to optimize the way that you're working together. So I think that's something that we should definitely focus on. One thing that's a problem is that if a team has had some retrospectives and they believe that they haven't gotten anything out of it and it's a waste of time, then they want to cut down on the time. So what you can do if that's already happened is focus on the things that they get out of it. Really focus on the action points and the things that they do get out of it. Focus on the experiments, and maybe having a retrospective over the retrospectives every 3 months or so, looking at all the things that you changed, looking at all the experiments you had, and really rubbing it in their face, saying, this is actually what we achieved. Now our testing process is much better. We have much less tech debt. We have much better planning, where we have time for support instead of just always getting frustrated. So remind them from time to time that they're actually getting something out of it. I hope that answered your question, Shashank.
Yeah, definitely, Corey. I think retro over a retro is definitely a great thought. Thanks for sharing that, Corey. So definitely, I'm gonna try that. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Amir,
Corey, how
I think
we
you
do
will.
that? Sorry. I have a lot of questions, but these people have a lot of questions. But just want to follow up question on Shashank's thing. How we do that? Retro of retro.
Yeah. Okay. So what I sometimes do is that, so I have this little book, and every time I have a retrospective with the team, I have retrospectives with several teams, and it's just a normal book. I write down the people there, the agenda I have, the alternative agenda, and all the action points from last time, and I set little arrows saying whether we did them or not, and if they didn't do it, was because they didn't have time or whatever. And then I put the action points or the experiments from this time. And so from time to time, maybe every 6 months, I have a retrospective where I say, okay, I look back in my book and I take all the action points. If it's online retrospectives, it's even easier, right? And I take all of the action points, put into one post-it note each, and then I make a board and I say, let's move the ones that you got done over and done, and then talk about the things that you got out of it. So that's the positive thing. Then we have a rest that's not done. Some of them might not be relevant anymore. So we sort of put them into, this is not relevant anymore. Then we have some that are not done, but are still relevant. Why are they not done? And that's the interesting thing. It could be because they're long-term goals. So it was something that it takes 6 months to do, but we put it into a sprint. So maybe we have to divide that down, splitting it down like a story. It could also be that we didn't get it done because it's actually something that we can't do anything about. It was in the soup, or it was something that we didn't actually have the energy to do. So sometimes people have a lot of things that, this will have a great impact, but nobody has the energy to do it. right? So it won't get done. It's like when people want to lose weight, it's great. We can talk about losing weight for months, but if you don't have the energy, nothing will happen, no matter how good an idea it is. So I would just take all the action points, put them on post-it notes, and then just look at all the things that we got done and the things that we didn't get done. Why didn't we get them done? So did that answer it, Sunand?
Yeah. Thanks, Corey. I think I have a retro
Yes.
very soon, so I think that'll definitely help. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And now I think
Okay.
Amir was the one who had his hand up first.
Yeah, Amir or Amit?
Amit. Sorry, it has been, pronounced
Oh,
as a typo.
oh,
So it's
sorry,
Amit here.
Amit.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I have one of the, scenario what has happened in my Agile team. Last week, we had a good 1 hour of a retro. And after that, I think Scrum Master tried to, take some of the actions over it. Suddenly, executive decision has taken it that it is a waste of time and everything has been cancelled. Okay. So what has happened into that retro is that that Scrum Master started with a why, that why this is not working, why that is not working, and this and all. So I think a complete retrospective has gone into a kind of doing the root cause analysis or challenging some person's ego or status quo, rather than really learning from it and how to improvise those kind of things, right? And in that retrospective, even the PO was also missing, or others party was also missing. It is just a one-sided feedback from a dev team has been taken it out. So whatever the feedback, this dev team has said that the real ownership and the real responsibilities was lying either on a PO or on the RT members outside of that particular retrospective. So I think others member do not felt very inclusive, that since they are not a part of that, what was the the problem and how they could have resolved it. So given in these situations, what would be your advice to the Scrum Master?
Well, so it's so to me it sounds like the problem is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Scrum Master facilitated retrospective where there was more focus on the causes and not so much focus on the conclusions. Is that true? Or did
Yeah,
I get
correct.
it?
Causes, yeah.
And then I need to understand what you said, that the manager said that we should stop doing all the things that you wanted to do, the action points or the retrospectives. I just need to understand that.
Complete retrospective has been halted, paused for a like there is no any date that when the another retrospective will happen. So certainly that has not gone well for the management.
So the management don't like the result.
Yeah, management don't like the result. Yes, they, from the PO side, they were having the expectation that we really needs to do the retrospective to improvise our flow, which is not happening yet. We are going into the circle and maybe making people very comfortable so that can do and all, but like it is not the result what we have tried to achieve.
Yeah.
From
Okay.
this team.
Yeah. So first, I think that there needs to be focus on making the conclusions from the retrospective. So perhaps when you're talking about the problems, maybe only talk about a few of them so that you have enough time to actually get to some of the conclusions or get to some action points or experiments that can improve it. But also, if the trouble with management is that they want things to go so fast, they don't really understand that some of these things take time. And it's a bit like if you want somebody who has never been, for instance, windsurfing before, you want them to windsurf, and you say, I want you to windsurf really fast, right? And they go to they try to windsurf and they just fall in the water the first 3 times, and then people will say, you'll never learn to windsurf, let's stop trying. The point is that there are so many things that you need to learn before you can surf or before you can develop software optimally. There's so many things that you need to make sure happens before you can. And in a team, one of the things that are important is that they can communicate, because if they continue to work as islands, then you'll never optimize the flow. You'll never optimize the work. So one of the things that are really important to me in a retrospective is that people get to talk to each other, understand each other, appreciate each other's skills and the skills that they don't have. And that's such a crucial factor in being able to optimize the work. The trouble with the management is that they want it to happen immediately. So I think that with management, maybe they need to have some sort of anecdote or some story that will enable them to understand that things take time, and you can't just have 3 retrospectives and then flow is much better. It's just not how it works. There's so many other things that needs to be fixed before you can optimize this. I don't know if that was an answer or just my opinion.
No, I think, yeah, I have also concluded that the management also needs to be, coach on agile. They need to also understand that maybe if you're doing it the first time, because agile is some sort of the experimentations. Wherever
Yeah.
there is a uncertainties, then we have adopted agile. If you are very sure about your results, and then you know that after a design I have to do this, after that I have to do this and all, right? So you could have done the the SDLC, why you are coming into the agile and all. So I think the management also needs to be coached. The POs and all who are really onto that particular the business area, they are quite uh, longer spent into that particular business domain, and they have their X way of working earlier. So they are really not so keen enough in understanding this kind of a things, where at the
Yeah.
end of the day there is no any tangible output is coming out, rather
Yeah.
than talking terms and all. So but like I
Yeah.
just want to validate it's your thought. So thanks, I know I got it.
Thank you. And I don't know who was the next one.
It's Dilip.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. Hi, Corry. For me, like when we do the retrospective with the team, I hear just one voice coming out from the tech lead. He puts up the mouth of all the team members, and rarely the team members speak out. And by the time he gets all the points put down, jotted down in the meeting, nobody talks about saying, okay, that's it. I think the tech lead had spoken for us as well. He has covered everything.
Yeah. So is the problem that he's talking too much, or that the other people are quiet, or both, do you think?
Both is the scenario. Yeah.
And what have you tried already?
I tried having it separately one-to-one with the team to say, okay, what's the problem here? Do you feel don't you feel psychological safe here to speak about? Does anybody stops you? Don't you have any points which we can improve? These all I tried it, but still I feel they get influenced by this tech lead out here.
Yeah, definitely. So that's something that I see very often, that somebody has a high hierarchical position in the team, and everybody's looking to that person to see
exactly.
what
And this
he
guy
or she's
is
saying.
like 3-4 years experience in the organization, and he knows like in and out of the product, something like that.
Yeah, but I think that what you already tried, talking to them one-on-one, talking about psychological safety, very, very good ideas. One thing that sometimes happen is that you just have to accept that things are the way they are, and you can't create the psychological safety, and then you just have to figure out how can I get information out of these people even though they're worried. And one thing you could do is that you could ask for anonymous data gathering before the retrospective, so you can set up some sort of document online where people can, like a Google drawing document, where people can be anonymous and they can add things. Because sometimes if they're doing it together, then you can even see, oh, people can see that I'm writing right now, so people can see I'm writing this one. So maybe collecting the data before the retrospective can help. Sometimes it's also difficult for people to actually formulate things. So in those cases, I sometimes use that agile, what's it called? The radar, the agile radar, where you have sort of spokes. Do you know that? We have a spoke for technical quality, spoke for happiness, spoke, and then people should put a point somewhere on that spoke at the 0, at the 5, because sometimes it's difficult for people to formulate. I don't think the testing process is doing well, or I don't think that people are doing the code reviews well, or something like that. But if they just have to put a point somewhere from 1 to 5, it might be easier for them to do it. But then, of course, you have to avoid that people can see where other people put these. And but there are, depending on what kind of document you use, there are different ways of doing that. So some of the online documents that takes you through the whole retrospective only allow for anonymous voting and anonymous, so that you can't see anything unless you've said something yourself. And that means that you can't just wait for the tech lead to say something until you say something, because everybody has to vote at the same time. So if I do that with my Google Docs, I have some templates on my website, then I ask people to pick up the dot, and then on 3 they have to put it down, so they can't see where other people put it down first. But it is a valid problem, and sometimes you can remove the problem, which is the psychological safety, and other times you can't, and you just have to work and remove the symptoms, unfortunately.
Can I add something over here, Corey?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell you something which is out of box. And yeah, whatever Corey told is pretty good. Anonymous voting and all those things is pretty good. But I'm just telling you something which maybe few of you will not agree on that, but it works. Okay. So now this is pretty common scenario. Obviously, whenever you go into a new team, let's say I joined some new organization, you will definitely find 1 or 2 senior guy who are there so long in that project and they know everything. And you cannot, I mean, people like worship those people because other team members are pretty new, they are fresher, they don't know much about, they are totally depend on 1 or 2 those key people, right? Now, what we can do, you can do one-to-one thing, everything. Believe me, I mean, I'm also there in some way, you know. So what I have tried, what I have done is, first of all, I had a word with this tech lead, whatever, 10 year, 20 year. And I told him that, okay, you are doing a lot of things. You are doing a lot of hand holding things, right? You are already giving a lot of technical things to these people, right? So why you are taking this extra responsibility of taking the data from these people and blah, blah, all these things, right? He understands that what I am trying to say, right? You cannot say directly to those people that, okay, stop doing that from tomorrow onwards. I am the Scrum Master. I will be the charge. Please do not do that. So you have to be a little bit more political. You have to be very careful what kind of statements you are using with those people, because those people are somehow technically, and they have, you know, these things that, okay, they hurt quite often, you know, so you cannot use that kind of language with those people. And you are not a manager, yeah, you are there as a people person, right? And for you, everyone is equal, whether it's 20 years or 5 years or 3 years, right? For you, everyone is equal, right? So treat them equally, and then tell them politely that, okay, this is what you meant for. This is your role and responsibility. This is not coming under your purview. Yeah. This is the one thing which you can do with those people, with the tech leads. Other thing is, go back to your team members, ask them, and I am again telling you, it will be sounds odd. Instead of giving all those inputs to that people, the tech lead, give to me. Now, what you are doing in this scenario, you are reducing the dependency on that guy. Sooner or later, these people will understand that, yeah, you are as a Scrum Master is their friend. Also their friend, right? Friend in the sense like, okay, you are also close with those people, right? You have to remove that dependency on that guy, both way. So talk to that guy and talk to these people as well. Tell them whatever input you are giving, give it to me. I will take it. I will put it on board. That's what you want. Let's do that. Now, if you keep doing this 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, then only they will start opening up with you. Okay. Because yeah, anonymous voting is good, but you never know, like, okay, why, who is coming, have this problem? Okay, I have this problem. I'm struggling. People are not helping me. But you don't know who is that guy, right? So you have to create that relationship with your team members, right? And this is something totally different thing. I mean, I am sure you might have not heard about this thing, but yeah, you have to think differently. And maybe this thing worked for me in my one of the project, but it cannot work for the other project as well, right? But I'm just sharing, like, okay, what you can do, think something different. Yeah, I mean, talk to them one-to-one. It's still not working. Why it's not working? What they are telling to you when you had a word with them one-to-one, that, okay, Dilip, why you're not talking in the retrospective? What is their reply? What is they telling? You have to jot it down, understand, and just listen. Do not come to any conclusion. They are telling that, no, I'm not technically that worse, and maybe I'm not able to speak. Okay, I'm there to help you. You tell me. Reduce that dependency on that other tech guy. Okay. So this is the one thing which I can think of. Yeah. So
I think that's a very good point. asking the why, again, talking to people and figuring out why is it that you're quiet, why is it you're not contributing, are you afraid, are you worried, can you talk to me? And as you see, I've written in the chat, Linda Rising, fearless change, champion skeptic, because sometimes that person with high authority in the team is also somebody that I've seen that sometimes who dislikes retrospectives and find them to be a terrible waste of time. So sometimes when I come across one of these, because if they think it's a waste of time, they can really make the whole team think it's a waste of time. And I use a pattern called Champion Skeptic from Linda Rising's book, Fearless Change, which is to take that skeptic person and make them your champion. So have a one-on-one with that person, as Sunan suggested, and then say, look, we really want these retrospectives to work. Can you help me? Could you please let me know if there's something you think is not working? And can you please help me try to plan the next retrospective, what you think the theme should be, what you think we should do, and things like that. Because then they go on board with you, and they want to help you instead of work against you. And now it's suddenly a part of something that they are doing. So they don't want to obstruct it, because now it's also them that's doing it. So that's a champion skeptic. And I think that's a very powerful pattern. And I think we have a question from Makesh Kumar now. I don't know if I pronounced that correct.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that's
Corey.
correct.
Thanks,
Yeah. So, hey, Corey, hope you're doing well and good. And your
you.
presentation was really informative, where personally I got more insights from your presentation. Thank you so much. And I have 3 basic questions and 1 challenges which I'm facing right now. So one is, which is the right time to schedule the retrospective? So in case if any team made 2 members, okay, or they were long-term leave, like 10 to 15 days, can we have a retrospective by that time, or do we want to wait until the people come back? By then we can have a retrospective.
Well, that's always a question, right? Should we cancel the retrospective while people are away? I think it's important to have the regularity of those retrospectives, and then sometimes some people are not there, but keep on having it, maybe every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, and maybe sometimes it's only half the people, but they have a chance to share what has happened for them and to work with it. So I think that you should just continue and then have perhaps a shorter retrospective.
Okay, all right, thank you. So my second question is, who should be a participant of the retrospective? So that is a main, because in my organization, they have a pattern. Client should also be part of it, and delivery managers, delivery director should also be a part of it. Whereas retrospective is for internal purpose, right? So what is the exact thing, and who should be the participants?
Well, I think that sometimes people mix up the review with the retrospective. And if you have a review of what has happened, then I think it's a very good idea to have everybody there, the client and maybe the manager or data analyst or whatever. But when you're talking about a retrospective, to me, a retrospective is something for the team. So that's just the core team. And then sometimes if you notice that there are some things that you want to discuss in the retrospective, but in the soup, then you could think about maybe inviting more people to the retrospective, because you can imagine that the circle of influence becomes bigger the more people you have at the retrospective. So if there's somebody always sort of missing, then you can say, could we at the next retrospective perhaps invite 2 people from this team, or perhaps invite a leader in here, because then maybe we can talk about these things.
All right. So I have what I have initiated is people were not speaking out when client been in the retrospective. So I educated them, and I controlled the client is not part of retrospective, but I couldn't control delivery directors and delivery managers voluntarily being part of it. They want to know what is the team progress and how they are happy. So, but still there are few challenges where coming up. I would ask you that challenges how to overcome as well. And the third question is, what are the patterns that we can follow on our happy index to maintain in the retrospective?
What do you mean? I don't understand that.
We can have many techniques that we can follow in the retrospective in order to maintain some happy index, how happy the people working in the project. So maybe in the numbers of emojis that we can make the people to have it in a retrospective, right? So what are the patterns that we can follow? You have any suggestion for that?
So patterns for measuring how happy they are, is that what you mean?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I normally say that if you can make people laugh at a retrospective, that's a good sign that they actually feel connected and relaxed enough to share things in the retrospective. So that could be a measure of happiness, that they can laugh together. But otherwise, you could have sometimes just a vote in the beginning where you ask just anonymously, where are you now on the happy scale? Or maybe you can have the different smileys and let them put their name on top of the smiley that fits with them or something like that. I mean, there are many ways of measuring that happiness. Sometimes people don't like measuring happiness because they don't really believe in happiness, that it should take place in the workplace. And then sometimes measuring the energy can be better. And then saying, how much energy do you have right now? And perhaps putting it on a scale online. So are you on a 3 or are you on a 5 or what? That can be a good thing to do as well. Because the happiness, sometimes it's difficult for some people. If that makes sense, I'm not sure
that's correct. Yeah. Even I tried that. Yeah. I just wanted to know whether I'm going the right way. So
I think so.
yeah.
But I think if we could just roll back to the thing about the managers, that you can't make the managers not go to the retrospectives, that's worrying to me. Because how can you make that setting of trust if people can hire or fire the people who are there?
Yeah, right. And thank you for that. And one challenges which I'm facing right now is, I already told you that my delivery managers and directors been a part of retrospective, right? My delivery directors come into that soup category where he's not much aware of what is agile, and he keep on pressurizing the team to meet the deadlines, because we already have a closed deadlines. Our project is fully fast paced, so we have a closed deadlines, and he used to call to the people during off business hours to make the work done. So this was communicated in previous retrospectives. In each and every retrospectives, indirectly there was a value which is posted by the developers, but he didn't inspect anything that. And today we have done with a 6th sprint of retrospective, and it was too spicy, and there were so many direct attacks happened to that delivery manager. So I had a one-on-one discussion when I did with delivery manager, and tried him to understand that we should not make this to happen. Because of this, the team is happy index is going down, and they are not interested to work further, and we cannot find the quality as well. But still he don't mind about it, and he replies back like, we have to delivery is our main goal that we have to do. I said, goal has to be defined through the process, not we should not go with only our goal. So how to overcome this?
See, the problem is probably that he is under pressure from above, right?
Correct. He's under pressure with client. So
yeah. So he's under pressure with the client, and he needs to get that pressure relieved in one way or the other. Because as long as he's under that pressure, whatever you say can't really change his mind, because he's worried and he doesn't know what to do. And the more he's under pressure, the less he can think. So if you have any possibility to have a one-on-one with him where you sort of can find something, I'm going to talk about laughter again. If you can find something to laugh at together, then that might relieve the pressure and the intensity so much so that he can start listening to what you're saying. And what you're saying is, I really believe in these retrospectives. I really believe that we need to spend the time to reflect on how we're working, because in the long run, that will make us work much more efficient. It's not a waste of time, but you need to allow us to work on the things so that we can learn how to surf, really. In other words, we'll just keep falling in the water. So if you can make him relax enough to actually listen to you, and it's not easy,
right,
then he might listen to what you're saying is sincerely, I'm not here to waste your time, and we are equally interested in making this work very fast. But we just have to think about, these are human beings, and working together, it's a system, and it's a complex system, not even just complicated, it's a complex system. So we really need this time to work together and to discuss how we can improve these things. But it's not easy. It's not easy for you.
I think I have to keep multiple one-on-one session with delivery manager to understand. That is the only thing which I have to do.
I think you have to do that.
You also have something called Agile Coach in your organization, Markesh?
There are agile consultant with it, but they are taking care of delivery part. There is no specific agile coach in my organization. whereas I cannot go and approach, is it a right way or wrong? So if I go and approach the agile consultant, they used to concentrate on the delivery part only.
Yeah, but it's
it's very
somehow you
hard.
have to. Yeah, I think the problem is that it might end up being something like you against him, and that's why I think Sunan's question is very good. It shouldn't be you against him. It should be the circumstances against the reality, right?
Right.
And the reality is you want to work agile because somebody, and I agree, thinks that that is the only way to create good quality software.
Correct.
But it takes some time in the beginning. But the more you make it like you against him, the less you'll get done. So think about the clients and think about the whole organization and talk about these things instead of talking about you two. I think that will relieve the pressure and maybe make him understand how he needs to accept that these things take time.
Right.
And Makesh,
Yeah,
you have
I
something called Center of Excellence in your organization, by any chance?
we don't have that.
Which organization you're working with?
Do you really need the organization name?
No. So see why I'm telling you, because see, someone hired you as a Scrum Master. Understand this, Makesh. You are
Okay.
doing your job, yeah.
Mm.
You have your some role and responsibilities. You are the
Right.
process owner, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
are hired. You have been interviewed by a couple of people. They hired you to add value to their organization, right? Now this guy, ABC guy, right? He is somehow conflicting with you, whatever you want to do, right? So someone has to tell him, either you or someone, his boss or his superior, someone has to tell him that please stop. Sometimes you have to tell them just stop. Please do not come in this meeting for next 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Take some vacation, go out. Okay.
But
You know,
maybe somebody else needs to tell him that, sure.
That's
honestly,
true.
you have to some point of time, you cannot keep on doing this because it's hampering the environment of your team. Tomorrow 2-3 team member will just jump out of the project. Now who will going to do the delivery? This guy? No, he's just a manager. Make him understand that, honestly.
Yeah, I have tried
Either
so
you
many
or someone
possible.
else. Find someone. Obviously, in an organization, you will find someone who can understand you. Sometimes it's hard. So let's say I have my brother, I have my sister. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell something to my sister, right? Then I will take help of my other brother or my mother or my father, who we both respect, right? So if you find someone who can talk to this guy, if you have done everything from your part, and if you are not able to find that positive outcome, find that other guy for you. And you have to find it very quick. Otherwise, you are not justifying your position as a Scrum Master in your organization, right? If you keep doing that. So you know the problem, you know whatever you can done, you have done. Now you have to think something else, because you cannot just continue just like that. Your team is going to run away, honestly, shortly. Yeah.
Obviously, that is happening. Yeah, I have to find a way.
So someone has to tell that guy that
Yeah.
if you, then you and me are the only people in the team after 1 or 2 months, right? So then who will going to do the delivery, right? So yeah.
Yeah. I'll do that, Sunan. Thank you for that.
Okay. We have one last question from Jaya. Jaya Chandra, sorry.
Susan, a continuation to this discussion, I have one point that the problem is, the problem originated from the client side. So the probably client is not aware of the agile practices and the agile way of working. So instead of we try to convince our delivery manager, why don't we go directly to the client and educate him in a formal way to follow the agile way of working and the delivery patterns. So is it a good idea to approach client directly?
Yeah, I think so. In my experience, you have to make the clients understand the way that you're working. You have to spend some time making them see the point for them in the way that you're working. So you have to remember, when you're talking to the client, don't say, you have to understand this is the way we work. You have to sort of sell it to them and say, in order for you to get the best quality, we are working in this way that's called agile. And the point of this is inspect and adapt, which means that you need to be part of this journey. You need to give us some time. You need to invest some time. So for instance, every 2 weeks, we will have a review where a representative of you will be there, and then you can see where we are going, and we can ask questions about whether we're going in the right direction. I think it's important to have this conversation with the client. I don't necessarily think that it is the developers who should take that initial communication with the client, but it could be developers in the review together with the client that can answer questions. I've seen some very interesting things happen once you start doing that. For instance, that you have a client who has always been very, very angry with this development team because they think that they're not delivering and they don't understand how can it be so hard. So after we started asking them to be part of this review, they now understand that some things take a lot of time. So for instance, they said, so we asked you to, when we enter the name here, the name should come out here. That should be really easy, right? Why has that taken 2 weeks? And then the development team could be there. They could say to the client, well, actually, we had to work with 5 different systems and we had to work with 5 different ways of representing data. And in order for it to not have any faults at your end, then we needed to change all these systems. And then the clients were like, okay, then we understand. And also another interesting thing that happened is that the client said, why does it take 20 minutes to update this? And the developers say, well, we can do it faster. How fast do you want it? And then the client says, we want it in 5 seconds. Can we have it in 5 seconds? And then the developer says, yes, we can do that. And then the client says, how long will that take? Well, that will take 2 months. And then the client was almost exploding. And then I said, well, what if it's 3 minutes? Would that be acceptable for you? Yes, 3 minutes is much better than 20 minutes. Right. How much would it take? I asked the developers and they said, that'll take 2 days. So that's starting that conversation, making them understand, because all this that we're doing is just a big black box to the clients normally, and they don't understand how complicated it is. So taking them on the journey, I mean, not necessarily showing them the database entries or anything like that, but looking at things that they can understand, like response time or security or safety or something like that, and having that genuine conversation with them along the way. It means that they have to spend time on it. They have to invest time. But at least in my experience, after a while, they can see the benefit. They can see that if they hadn't had that conversation, they would have just said 20 minutes is too long. It should take 5 seconds. And then it would have taken 2 months, right? Do you see my point?
Yeah, understood. And is it, and this responsibility is more on the management or Scrum Master just to
Yes,
approach?
yeah. The Scrum Master normally does not have the mandate to do that. It needs to be somebody who's in management who can say, well, we need somebody who can talk to clients and explain to them that this is how we work in order to make it better for you. And sometimes it works for me to say to the client, this is just an experiment. Let's try this out for a month, and then let's evaluate if it's worth your time. Because if you try to convince them this is how it's going to be for the next 2 years, then just say, no, we can't invest that amount of time. You do your bit, we do our bit, right? But if you say, let's try it for a month and then evaluate, then it's sometimes easier for them to accept.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Good luck with it. We don't have easy jobs.
Okay, thanks. Anything else before we
Yeah,
close?
I have one more. I mean, the typical challenge that I am facing in my team right now. So I have 2 teams. The second team is the pretty new one. I mean, it's been 6 months now, and the most of the times this retrospective meetings happens and the points are jotted down and the action items are jotted down, but none of the items are taken any action on those items. So every time there will be a excuse that because of this dependency we did not do, because of the current work assignments we are unable to take those points into consideration. So so this is really a big challenge from the past few months. I'm trying to put it in a workable way, but it's not happening. So what could be the good idea to initiate on this part?
Well, again, it's a question of symptoms and causes, right? Because it really depends what the cause is. Sometimes people don't follow up on the action points because they're not visible, and then you can just put them in the Jira or put them on the wall. Sometimes they don't follow up on them because other things get higher priority, and then you have to try to prioritize them in the planning together with the other things so that it gets up high. And sometimes it's because they really didn't have the energy to do these things, or perhaps they're afraid that if they don't give things to the customers first and foremost, then they'll lose their jobs. And in that case, you should consider, should we focus the retrospectives on something else, something that's more cost benefit close than the things that we normally talk about? And then try having some retrospectives where the only action points are things where they can definitely see that this makes the quality of the code better or the tech that less or something like that. But it really depends on what the cause is behind these things. It could also be, as we talked about before, that they've chosen action points that they can't really change themselves, or they've chosen action points that they don't really believe in. Sometimes you choose action points and people in the team, because it was a democratic vote, then the majority won, and some people in the team might not believe in it, and then they won't happen. So it really depends on the cause.
Okay, I'll just add 1 or 2 points over here, Jason. So you can do what I've seen, what I've observed with many teams, that okay, after retro, they just forget about retro. I mean, yeah, we have action items and that's it. They will be somewhere in SharePoint and somewhere. So important thing, first of all, your action item should be visible, okay, on your board somewhere. So and then see, there are few very basic things with respect to action items. First of all your action items should have some action owner. That's very important. It can be anyone, but you have to be assigned the name, not role. You cannot say team lead. No, you have to mention Sunan Sharma or Corry or Jayachandra. So action, then what we can do about this? Whether something which I can resolve myself, or is there something which is I have a dependency? Okay, if I have a dependency, how we can resolve this dependency? We as a team, can we resolve this dependency, or we require any help from anyone else, right? If anyone else help required, who is that guy, person? Find out that. And if you are doing that work, finding out the dependency or who is the person, you put your name over there. With all the action items, you have date. Expected ETA should be there with your action item. So some action item may be fulfill in next 1 week, but someone will take 1 month. Someone will may take 2 months, right? So put the status correctly. In progress. Okay, if it's in progress, what is the update over there? Okay, weekly update or whatever the date, update should be there. It has to be visible. Everyone can see. Or one more step, what you can do, if not every day, every alternative day, or at least on weekly basis, open that thing. So let's say you have a daily Scrum call, right, in the morning. After that, spend, let's say every Friday, spend 5-10 minutes, more minutes, and visualize that, open that action item and show in front of everyone that, okay, this is what we have done. This is my progress. This is what we are happening. This is where we stuck. Give them some kind of update. It's very much required. Okay, we just forget 2 weeks again, we will just open that. Give that proper update, maybe in the form of email. Send one Friday fun kind of mail that, hey guys, we are doing great, blah, 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 something. And then, okay, these are the updates from our previous week action retro. Mail them with proper something, put some emoji or whatever, but give them some kind of update. It's very important. When your team will start feeling that, okay, someone is doing something on those action items, then only they will start engaging, then only they will start doing all these things. Okay, people forget. I have seen a lot of Scrum Master team, they just forget about after retro. Everyone just rushed toward their home and that's it. Please do not do that. Please do not do that. I am just telling you few real actual tips which will work for you. If you start doing that, put the name of the action owner, because when I will get the responsibility, I will going to do that. You cannot just put, okay, whole team. No one is accountable. You have seen that RACI matrix, right? RACI, right? Put one name, accountability of this action item belongs to this guy. Then only it will work, action items. And it's a very pretty basic, forget about agile or anything, right? Action item, action owner with ETA, with proper update, status in progress, blah, blah, blah. On, if not daily basis, not alternatively, at least weekly basis, you should take that pain and send that update. Even if it's no action is done, put no action. I'm doing that. I'm doing the follow-up, but still it will take time. Next week, after 2 weeks, you have one more retro. Again, take that as an input, open that, show them first, whatever we have done in last 2 weeks. This is the progress of my previous week action item. Then add that one more. So you have then your own backlog kind of thing where you have a lot of action items. Okay. Your action item can go from 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. Have proper action item. Put some priorities over there. Something which is people like just, want that. Have one that high priority item. Do that session with your manager or whoever immediately. Some item maybe take some time. Let's say they are asking for some infrastructure thing. It will take time, approval, this and that. Put some ETA, right? Make them understand that, okay, which we can achieve in next week, which we can achieve in 2 weeks, which we can achieve in 6 months. Make them understand this. It's not that easy job. Okay. So yeah, that's the only thing I just want to add over here. Yeah. Thank you guys.
Yeah, you rightly mentioned the ownership and the visibility. The 2 points are most important. Yeah.
We forget a lot of time. I have seen people forget. So you have to make them realize that, okay, someone is doing something on those action items. Yeah. And you can have one-to-one conversation with your action owners. What is happening over here? Can I help you with something? If I can see you are busy with your own technical thing. Can I help you with this action item? Then he will realize that, okay, though I am the action owner, but there's someone is there who can take my responsibility. Understand the difference between accountability and responsibility. Okay. Though he is just still the accountable, but then you can go and help him or her. Okay, I can help you with this small thing. Yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Thank you, Sunan.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think my brain is tired now.
Okay, guys, I think we have just shoot out that our limit half an hour more instead of 1 hour is like 1.5 hours. So thank you everyone. And yeah, I think it's a great session. Lot of conversation, lot of challenges, issues which we have discussed. So Corey, thank you one more time, and maybe we'll see one more session from you in future with so many questions are coming out. Thanks,
Yes.
Corey. Thanks a lot. And thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining
Goodbye.
us today.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks,
Bye.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice
Corey.
day.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
Thank you, Sunan.
Bye.
Bye.